Hey everyone, this is Jungkook. Before we start, I want to know where you're listening from. Drop your country in the comments below. Tonight feels like standing at the edge of a stage before the lights come on, hearing a sea of voices I love, but not seeing a single face yet. There's a quiet right before the first note where your heartbeat is the metronome, and you realize that whatever you sing next is going to reveal more of you than you planned. That's where I am. My mom just told me when I can get married. And it wasn't a command the way headlines like to imagine. A mother's words are commands. It felt more like permission wrapped inside a prayer, a time frame drawn, not with ink, but with care. It shook me. Not because I'm afraid of love, but because the moment you draw a circle around a date, your whole life starts to rearrange itself toward it. Moments like this expose what's real. Fame doesn't protect you from truth. It puts truth under a brighter light. I keep thinking about how many of you have watched me grow up, not only through songs and stages, but through the gaps, the silence, the times I was figuring out who I am when there isn't a camera and there's no set list. You've celebrated my highlights and forgiven my stumbles, and somehow you made me feel brave enough to get back up and try again. I don't take that lightly. When I say Army is my family, I mean it in a way that is deeper than slogans. The kind of family that holds up a mirror gently and says, "We love you as you are, and we love you enough to hope you become even more." I've held that mirror a lot these days, because if you're gonna say vows, your reflection needs to be honest. I remember the phone call with my mom. There wasn't drama. There was a softness in her voice, a kind of steady breath that mothers have when they're trying to give you something precious without making it heavy. She said, "I think you'll know when it's time, but I also think it's closer than you think." It wasn't a date circled in red. It was a lantern hung on the path. I didn't feel pushed. I felt seen. And if you've ever been seen by someone who watched you scrape your knees as a kid and watch you chase impossible dreams as an adult, you know that feeling is half comfort, half wake-up call. Jimin knows the truth. He always has this way of hearing what I don't say out loud. We were in a quiet kitchen, no lights, just the hum of the fridge and that kind of city hush that shows up after midnight when even the traffic is tired. I told him the gist of it, that the conversation with my mom left me with a calm kind of urgency. He didn't smile big or react the way a show would want. He just nodded like he'd already been preparing for this chapter with me in his own heart. He said something like, "Then let's make sure your inside is as ready as your outside." That's the part he understands better than almost anyone. Concerts and cameras are the outer life. The inner life is where vows are forward. And the truth he knows is simple. I can't sing about love bigger than the love I actually live. I think about the guys RM with that patient mind, like a librarian who knows exactly which book you need to read next, and somehow it's the one that makes your soul quieter. He'd say, "Write it down. If you can name what you want your marriage to stand on, you can build on it." Jin would nudge me with a joke and a very real kind of older brother care that says, "Eat, rest, then decide," because so many bad choices are just hungry choices. Suga would sit back and let silence become a guide. And then he'd drop one line that rearranges the room. "Decide for the days without applause." J-Hope would bring that open window energy, the sunlight that makes dust look like glitter, reminding me that joy isn't a mood you wait for. It's a practice you keep. Tae-young would tilt his head and listen to the spaces between my words, then ask, "Does your future feel like a song you want to sing every day?" And it would make me smile, because when he asks questions like that, it's not poetry, it's a compass. The thing nobody tells you about choosing a life partner is that your calendar starts to feel spiritual. Not religious in the way people argue about online, but spiritual like breath. Like every date carries a promise to show up for another human being on ordinary Tuesdays and on scary Thursdays and on those Saturdays that look perfect on Instagram but were hard to get to. I've learned that love is a craft. You don't stumble into it and stay there by accident. You practice it, you train for it, you forgive inside it, you grow muscles that nobody can see but everybody can feel. My job taught me a lot about rhythm and rehearsal and all the ways you can fail and try again. But this is deeper. This is, who am I when the lights are off and it's just our two voices in a small kitchen at 1 a.m. deciding how to be kind to each other tomorrow. People talk about exposure like it's this harsh thing, like a spotlight that burns. But I've learned exposure is also warmth when you let it be. When my mom said what she said, I felt two exposures at once. The boy in me who wanted to run because big decisions feel like cliffs. And the man in me who wanted to kneel because big decisions feel like altars. I didn't choose either right then. I just breathed and I wrote. I wrote questions that were messy and honest. What do I bring into a marriage that is sturdy? What do I bring that still needs healing? What's beautiful about my ambition and what's dangerous about it? How do I protect the simple things when everything I do is watched by millions? If you're listening, maybe write your own questions too. Drop a line like, I'm listening in the comments, not for me, but to mark the moment for yourself. Sometimes the difference between drifting and deciding is one sentence you write down. I won't pretend I know the future. I've seen too many plans break and become doorways we needed. But I know the shape I want my future to have. A house where laughter sounds like home, where music is not a trophy but a table we eat at, where faith is not a performance but that first quiet breath we take in the morning. I want to be the kind of husband who keeps his promises on boring days and learns how to apologize in a way that doesn't make the other person do my emotional homework for me. I want to be the kind of father, if I'm blessed with that, that shows up on the floor with toy cars and on the tough nights with a patient voice. Those aren't glamorous dreams, but they are the ones that survive storms. When I think of Army, I think of the way you've taught me to return to center. You cheer for the fireworks, yes, but you also cheer for the small things. Someone being kinder this year than last year. Someone admitting they're tired and then resting well. Someone saying I was wrong and then actually changing. You've taught me that growth isn't a headline. It's a habit that eventually leaves evidence. I carry that into everything now, including this. If love grows by habit, then I want my habits to be love's favorite garden. Listening first, speaking with care, keeping my word, telling the truth gently, laughing easily, holding hands with the future instead of trying to strangle it into submission. I'm not naive about the cost. There's a part of my life that will always be public, and I accept that with gratitude and boundaries. Gratitude because I get to sing and dance and write and share it with you. Boundaries because love needs protected spaces to remain tender. I used to think strength meant being able to do everything in front of everyone. Now I think the bravest thing might be to carry certain treasures quietly, to let some moments be ours, not content, to refuse the noise long enough to hear the person right in front of me. If that disappoints some people, I understand. But the truth is, the person I will promise my life to deserves the version of me who can leave a party, sit on the floor, and have a difficult conversation without looking for a camera angle. I've learned so much from my brothers about that. We've stood shoulder to shoulder through weather. I never had words for when I was younger, the kind of seasons that test your inner foundation. We made mistakes and we forgave. We gave each other space and then came back stronger. That's the blueprint I keep seeing in my head now. Not perfection, but choosing each other on the days when it would be easier to hide. I think that's what my mom was really saying under her words. Not this date, but this readiness. Not hurry up, but grow up into the kind of love that lasts. And if you've ever heard a mother pray without moving her lips, you know what I mean. There's a softer truth I want to share too. Sometimes love starts as a whisper you try not to hear because it might change everything. Sometimes it's the friend who keeps showing up with quiet honesty, the one who tells you your song is beautiful and then asks if you're singing it from a rested heart. Sometimes it's the way old fear finally runs out of arguments because hope showed up every day and outlasted it. The truth Jimin knows isn't gossip or drama. It's that I'm more joyful, more grounded, more myself, when my life is aligned with love. He's watched that arc like a careful choreographer watches a dancer find the beat they were missing. He knows when my steps are true. He also knows when I'm just performing for approval. That's a kind of friendship I don't take for granted. If I could ask you for one thing tonight, it would be this. Choose one small practice that keeps you honest and hold it like a rope. Maybe it's writing one real paragraph to yourself every morning. Maybe it's taking a walk without your phone and letting your thoughts catch up to you. Maybe it's a simple prayer that starts with thank you and ends with help me. Don't try to rebuild your whole life in a weekend. Build a rhythm that makes your future steady. That's what I'm doing. And when the day comes, whenever it comes, when I take that step into a promise, I want to bring a steady future with me, not just a beautiful day. I've always believed music is a bridge, but lately I've been thinking marriage is its own kind of bridge too. You don't test a bridge during a storm. You build it before the weather turns. You check the cables, the bolts, the quiet parts that nobody applauds for. That's where I'm living now, in the maintenance that makes tomorrow possible. Some people call that boring. I'm starting to call it holy. I used to chase fireworks. Now I want a fire that warms a whole room for years. If you're listening from a country I've never been to yet, or from a city where the night markets spill color onto the street, or from a small town where the same neighbors wave every morning, know that I'm grateful for you. You've given me a bigger map than I could have drawn alone. And somewhere on that map is a home I'm learning how to build. If tonight has exposed anything, I hope it's this. I don't want a perfect picture. I want a true story. I don't want applause for the moment. I want companionship for the years. I don't want to be right all the time. I want to be kind at the right time. And when my mom's lantern on the path leads me to the day that becomes our day, I want to arrive with a heart that has been practicing the future, not just dreaming it. So I'm breathing, I'm listening, I'm writing, I'm growing. I'm thanking the people who raised me, and the brothers who stood with me, and the friends who told me the kind of truth that heals. I'm holding the hand of hope, not squeezing too tight, just enough to say I'm here. And if you've read this far, maybe you're holding it too. Type, I choose to stand, if you want to mark this moment with me. Not for hype, but for memory. Because some nights you don't need a loud ending. You need a quiet promise that keeps echoing after the lights go down. And that's what tonight is for me, a quiet promise to be the man my future deserves. The night after that quiet promise, I woke up before the sun and sat by the window with a cup I never finished, watching the sky turn from ink to charcoal to something soft. There's a moment just before light arrives when you can feel your own heartbeat more than you hear it. And I thought about how many decisions are made in that kind of light, the not quite morning, where nobody is asking for a photo, nobody is waiting for a verse, nobody needs you to be impressive. That's where courage is small and real. I keep hearing my mom's voice, not as an order, but as a blessing. Like she handed me a lantern and said, carry this until it shows you the door. It's strange how 5 or 6 simple words can reorganize your entire future. How a timeline that used to be a fog suddenly has edges. And you realize the edges aren't a cage. They're a frame for love to grow inside. I walked through the days differently after that. Not dramatically, just more awake to the ordinary. I paid attention to the way a grocery aisle feels like a prayer when you're choosing food for someone you love. I paid attention to silence, how silence can be distance, but it can also be trust. I noticed how often I fill the room with sound so I don't have to hear the softer truths breathing under everything. I asked myself questions I used to save for the end of the year. Who am I when nobody is clapping? What do I do with worry when it pretends to be wisdom? How do I keep tenderness from becoming another performance? These aren't pretty questions, but I'm learning that love prefers honest questions over pretty answers. Jimin came by late and sat on the floor like he always does when he knows I'm not looking for advice as much as I'm looking for a friend who won't blink while I say the messy parts out loud. He listened the way people listen to the ocean at night, not trying to count the waves, just letting the rhythm undo the knots. He asked me, if tomorrow contained the promise you're praying for, what would you do today to be ready for it? It was such a simple way to pull the future into the present without making it heavy. We started talking about habits that keep a heart steady. Sleeping before the soul gets frayed, eating before decisions, exercising like the body is a friend I'm keeping for 50 more years, praying like gratitude is oxygen, journaling like I'm leaving breadcrumbs I can follow back to myself when the noise gets loud. He smiled when I said I want love that outlasts mood. He said, then become someone whose kindness doesn't need applause to show up. He's right. The truth he knows about me isn't a secret, it's a standard. I keep hearing each of the guys in my head like a chorus that knows exactly when to enter. RM will remind me to write out the values first. If we can name the foundation, we can build the house. Jin will drop humor like a safety net and then say the one practical thing that changes the week. Eat on time, rest on purpose. Joy is also discipline. Suga will look through the surface and say, make the decision for the quiet days. And somehow that makes every loud day less confusing. J-Hope will turn on a light I forgot was even in the room and help me remember that celebration is a responsibility, not an accident. If I cultivate wonder, I'll have it when storms try to dim the room. Taeyoung will ask a question like a compass. Does your future sound like a melody you can hum in the kitchen? And I'll realize that I don't only want fireworks. I want a song that knows how to hold me on Tuesday afternoon. My family's voices braid through those thoughts in a way that makes me feel both older and younger at the same time. There's something about hearing your parents cheer for your adulthood that makes your childhood more vivid. I can see the small table that used to hold more hope than food. The hallway I used to run down. The door I kept pushing open toward a life that seemed too big for my hands. Maybe that's why this season feels holy to me. Not religious as an argument, but holy, like breathing in and finally breathing out the fear that I won't be enough. Maybe enough isn't a finish line. Maybe enough is a vow you renew by showing up again tomorrow with a willing heart. I think about Army more than I can explain. You've given me a classroom for courage, a laboratory for growth, a family photo where the love is bigger than all the mistakes. You taught me that accountability can be kind, that honesty can be gentle, that boundaries can protect the most beautiful parts of us. You told me with your patience that it's okay to becoming looks awkward sometimes. That the gaps are where grace gets to work. So when I tell you I'm preparing for a promise I can't fully describe yet, I'm telling you as someone who learned from you how to prepare for a stage before seeing the audience, how to write a verse before hearing the beat, how to make a life before posting a picture. I am not pretending this is simple. Loving anyone in public requires the kind of wisdom I can only grow slowly. There are things I want to carry quietly. The inside jokes that make hard days lighter, the arguments that ended with forgiveness instead of a plot twist, the ordinary routines that look like nothing but feel like oxygen. If there's any lesson the years have carved into me, it's that the most sacred rooms don't need a spotlight. I want to be brave enough to be ordinary where it matters most. Not bland, not hiding, just ordinary in the way a strong tree is ordinary. Nothing to prove, roots down deep, branches giving shade to whoever needs it. A mentor once told me that people confuse readiness with certainty. Certainty is about outcomes. Readiness is about character. You won't know every detail, he said, but you can become someone trustworthy to the details. That sentence has been following me around like a good rumor. I can't predict every season a marriage will walk through, but I can become someone who brings calm to storms, laughter to long days, humility to misunderstandings, and repair to the places where pride wants to win. I can learn to apologize without explaining, to listen without rehearsing my answer, to keep my word without keeping score. There's a practice I've started that's changing me in quiet ways. Every night, I write down 3 things: something I'm grateful for, something I could have done with softer hands, and something I'll try differently tomorrow. It takes 5 minutes, but it feels like I'm tuning an instrument I plan to play for a very long time. Gratitude makes the present enough. Softness makes the truth bearable. Trying again makes the future less scary. If you want to try it with me, maybe whisper your 3 lines into your notes before you sleep. Not for the algorithm, just for your future self who will wake up needing a gentle push toward who you're becoming. I know some people will want a headline out of all this. It's okay. Headlines live on billboards, vows live at kitchen tables. What I can tell you is that I'm walking toward a day that feels closer than it used to, with a lantern my mom handed me, and the quiet confidence of friends who refuse to let me become smaller than the love I sing about. I will not rush to satisfy curiosity if it means starving what needs time. I will not barter privacy for validation. I will not mistake noise for belonging. I want the kind of life that can survive a power outage. I want to be someone whose love still works when the Wi-Fi doesn't. If there's a sentence that keeps circling back to me, it's this. The future is not a surprise party. It's a garden. Gardens don't appear because you wish them into existence. They grow because you show up in mud and sun and rain, and you keep showing up when nothing looks different yet. You trust the process, you can't post, you water the soil with habits that nobody claps for, and then one morning you notice a leaf where yesterday there was only hope. That's what I'm building now. Not a spectacle, a garden. And when the day comes, I want to bring someone I love into a space that's been tended, not just decorated. So I'm staying here, in this ordinary holiness, letting time do its quiet work while I do mine. I'm making music that feels like a door propped open for joy. I'm choosing friends who tell me the kind truth. I'm honoring family by becoming the man they prayed I'd be when they didn't have the language for it yet. I'm listening to the voice in me that isn't fear and isn't pride. It's that steady place where peace takes off its shoes and rests. If you're walking your own road toward a promise, I'm cheering for you from this window where the light is growing. Tell me only if you want to, what practice keeps your heart honest these days? Write just a few words, somewhere only you will read. Sometimes that's all it takes to turn a distant hope into a near horizon. And when the horizon finally becomes a door, I'll step through it with both hands open, carrying what matters and leaving behind what doesn't. Approval I can't eat, perfection I can't afford, armor that never fit. I'll bring the laughter, the lessons, the brothers, the prayers, the small habits that train my heart to be gentle, and the steady truth. Jimin keeps reminding me of that. Love is only as real as the person you become to protect it. If that's the truth that guides me, then I think I'll be ready. Not because I know every answer, but because I'm learning to ask the right questions and stay long enough to live them. The next morning, I found myself cleaning the apartment the way you do when your thoughts are louder than your playlist, wiping counters that were already clean, folding shirts no one would see, opening the window just enough to let the city's breath turn the room into a soft court. I wasn't stalling, I was making space. There's a kind of order you build on the outside that lets your inside sit down and tell the truth. I brewed tea. I don't usually drink and set my phone face down because I wanted to hear the older parts of me speak. The kid who ran between rooms chasing melodies, the teenager who learned how much silence a practice room can hold, the young man who discovered that applause doesn't fix a lonely heart. It just pauses it for a while. I called my dad. We don't overcomplicate words. We let them land and do their work. He has a way of measuring time by weather, like life makes more sense if you remember which season carried which lesson. He asked how I slept, whether I'd eaten, and then he asked, so gently I almost missed it, are you proud of the way you're preparing? It wasn't, are you ready? As if the future were a door with a password. It was, are you proud? As if the future were a room you've been painting slowly. Stroke by stroke, color by careful color, I told him the truth. I'm proud of the questions I'm asking, of the habits I'm choosing, of the people I'm listening to. I'm still afraid sometimes, but I'm learning to treat fear like a weather report, not a verdict. He laughed softly, said, that sounds like adulthood. And in that moment, I felt the whole line of our family standing behind me, not pushing, just steady. Later, RM came over with a notebook the size of a small door and said, let's write the foundation, not the furniture. We sat at the table and turned the air into sentences. What do we want to promise to rest on? Truth without sharp edges. Joy that doesn't need an audience. Boundaries that protect tenderness. Rest that isn't earned by exhaustion but honored by wisdom. We wrote and crossed out and wrote again until the page looked like a map of a city we were both learning. He told me that values aren't slogans. They're the quiet rules you keep when nobody would blame you for breaking them. I thought about all the times I've kept noise close because silence felt like a risk. And then I thought about vows, how they're made, yes, in front of people, but they survive far from them. He underlined a sentence and slid the notebook my way. Decide who you'll be on ordinary Wednesdays. I stared at it longer than I expected to. J-Hope leaned in later with that sunlight he carries, like it's a language. He doesn't ask if you're okay. He helps your day become okay by the way he moves through it. We walked a long loop through streets that smelled like bread and rain, and he reminded me that celebration is a discipline, the way gratitude is. He said, "Don't save your joy for perfect pictures. Practice it now so it doesn't feel like a costume later." We laughed about nothing and everything, and I could feel my shoulders dropping from around my ears. I told him I want my home to be a place where laughter knows the way even when the lights are off. He said, "Then laugh on purpose today. The future borrows from that." Suga called from the studio, asked if I wanted to sit in on a session. No pressure, just come, breathe the room. The room had that familiar hum, wires like veins on the floor, a metronome clicking, its patient little truth. He played a beat that sounded like a heart remembering, then muted it and let the silence say the rest. He has a gift for cutting through to the sentence that outlives the moment. "Make decisions for the days no one will post about," he said without looking up. And then he hit play again as if the song itself needed to hear it. I wrote the line on my wrist with a dull marker and left it there through a shower, a nap, a phone call, a meal. It stayed for one more day than I expected. That felt like a sign. Taeyoung brought an old camera and told me to stand by the window. I asked why. He said, "Because you look like a song you haven't recorded yet." He snapped a photo and didn't let me see it right away. "Later," he smiled, "when the picture looks like a memory and not a mirror." I didn't fully understand until hours after he left, when I picked up the camera and saw myself not posing, just being shoulders soft, eyes honest, the exact version of me I want to bring into every promise I make. He has that way of asking art to be a witness, not a performance. I put the photo on the fridge like a quiet instruction. Jin sent a voice note with a joke so perfectly timed I forgot I was thinking, then ended it with, "Eat the soup before you decide the future." I made the soup. It tasted like the world isn't ending and I still have to do the dishes. Maybe wisdom is as simple as that, sometimes simple and practical and almost too ordinary to post. I'm starting to trust the ordinary more than I used to. It's where the good roots hide. That night, the city wore its glitter again. I stood on the balcony and listened to all the lives, colliding and mending and trying again. My phone buzzed with messages, army, telling stories from their kitchens and buses and night shifts, telling me the habits they were trying, the sentences they were writing to their future selves. Someone said, "I started the 3 lines tonight." Someone else said, "I walked without my phone and heard my breath for the first time in weeks." It made me realize how community is a choreography you can learn, even when you're dancing alone in your living room. We sync to one another by telling the truth at the same time in different places. I caught myself praying without naming it a prayer, not a formal thing, just a breath turned into a request. Make me steady where I'm still stormy. Make me kind where I'm still defensive. Make me a safe place to land. I used to think spirituality was a room with certain rules. Now I think it's a road you walk honestly with the people you love when nobody's grading your steps. I want to carry that into everything, the writing, the rehearsals, the dinners, the choice to put my phone down and let an evening be small and whole. There was a moment, tiny, almost nothing, where I reached for my phone to take a picture of the tea steaming in the cold air and stopped. I asked myself who needed to see it and why. Sometimes the answer is share it. It'll make someone smile. Sometimes the answer is keep it. It'll make your future stronger. I kept it. Later, I told the story instead. Stories last in a different way. They become bridges for someone else to cross when the water looks high. As I write this, I can hear the clock. in the other room, doing its unglamorous job. Time isn't a villain, and it isn't a hero. It's the stage manager that keeps tapping its watch, so the show we call our life doesn't run too long in one scene. I'm learning to thank it, not because it's generous, sometimes it isn't, but because it keeps me honest. It reminds me that preparation isn't punishment, it's love moving early. The date my mom lit with her lantern feels near, but it doesn't scare me in the way it did on the first night. It feels like a train I can hear before I see the rhythm of it telling me to gather my things, check my pockets for the small kindnesses, make sure I'm bringing what matters and leaving behind what's heavy and hollow. Before I sleep, I read the page from RM's notebook again and fill a blank space at the bottom. Tell the truth gently, especially to yourself. I think about what Jimin said about becoming someone whose kindness shows up even when no one claps, and I set out my running shoes like a promise I plan to keep in the morning. I put Taeyoung's photo back under the magnet and laugh at the way it makes the whole kitchen feel like a gallery for everyday courage. I text Suga a simple thank you. I send a moon emoji to J-Hope because with him it always means more than it looks. I reply to Jin with a picture of an empty bowl and the word powerful. I don't know what tomorrow will ask of me, but I know what I want to bring to it. A heart that listens more than it argues. Hands that build more than they point. Eyes that look for the person in front of me instead of the version of them that fits my mood. If I can do that, then when the door finally opens and I step into a promise that will remake my days, I'll recognize myself there. Not the poster, not the headline, just the man who learned how to be gentle without getting smaller, strong without getting hard, hopeful without getting careless. And maybe that's the real readiness my mom was pointing at with her lantern, becoming someone who can carry joy without spilling it, who can carry sorrow without breaking what's beautiful, who can carry love without dropping their own soul. So I'm here in this quiet room that has become a classroom again, practicing the future in small ways. Soup before decisions, laughter before conclusions, prayer before panic, a walk before a reply, a journal before a performance. If you're building something similar wherever you are, know that I'm grateful for your company on this road. We might never hear each other's footsteps, but I think we'll recognize the destination by the way the door opens wide enough for two lights spilling out, like an answer we waited for without rushing. When it does, I'll breathe, I'll smile, and I'll step through. Not certain of everything, but certain of who I'm becoming. And that, I think, is enough to begin. The day after the photo on the fridge began to feel like a quiet teacher. I took a long walk without music and let the city tell its stories. Street vendors arguing softly over prices. A cyclist apologizing to a pigeon. A toddler handing a crushed flower to a stranger as if generosity were the most natural language we all forgot how to speak. I kept thinking about how love has always been teaching me the same small lesson in 1,000 disguises. Show up with your whole heart, even when the moment looks ordinary. I ducked into a tiny jewelry shop because the rain started and I needed a roof, not a symbol. The owner didn't look up right away. He was polishing a ring as if it were an heirloom from a world where patience still sets the rules. He asked if I needed help and I said, not yet. He nodded like he understood. I didn't touch anything. I just watched how light rests on metal that's been held by many hands. I told myself that when I choose, I want it to be because the promise fits, not just the ring. On the way home, I stopped at a crosswalk and caught my reflection in a dark window. No stage lights, just a face learning how to listen. I remembered something my mom said years ago when I was exhausted and trying to outrun it with work. She told me, speed hides the thirst that only water can answer. Back then, I thought water meant sleep. Now I think it means honesty. I called her from the sidewalk just to hear her narrate something small, like the way the stew simmered slower than usual because the flame was misbehaving. We laughed, and then we fell into that soft space where the conversation breathes for itself. She said, I didn't give you a command, I gave you a horizon. Walk toward it at a pace that lets you see the flowers. Somehow, it made everything inside me sit down and take off its shoes. Later that night, I found Jimin in the practice room, lights down to a hush, mirrors waiting like patient witnesses. He was stretching in that absent-minded way that means his thoughts are 2 steps ahead of his body. I told him about the jewelry shop, about not touching the glass, about wanting the promise to fit a life we can carry without dropping ourselves. He listened with the kind of attention that makes your words better than they sounded in your head. Then he stood and said, "Let me show you something." He put on a track that wasn't finished, just a skeleton, a heartbeat and a breath. We moved without choreography, like 2 people remembering the alphabet of motion. The grammar of balance: give, receive, step back, step in. He whispered, "This is what vows feel like when you're doing them. Right enough structure to be safe, enough freedom to be alive." The truth he knows about me is that I chase excellence until it forgets it's supposed to be kind. He reminded me with the hand on my shoulder that excellence is mercy when it's mature. I exhaled as if I'd been holding my breath for months. Messages kept finding me wherever I went. DMs from Army on night shifts, on lunch breaks, on buses, in kitchens. One said, "Today I set a chair for my future self and asked them what they need. They said water and gentleness." Another said, "I forgave someone and slept like a new person. I carried their sentences like lucky coins in my pocket and paid with them whenever worry tried to buy my mood." There's a kind of community that makes you taller without asking you to stand on your toes. We've built that together over the years. It's humbling to realize how many strangers hold parts of your courage when you think you're carrying it alone. RM came by with tea that tasted like focus. He had that notebook again, the one that looks like it could be used to prop open a heavy door if a metaphor needed help. We sat at the table and made another list, not of goals, but of practices. He said, "Furniture is nice, foundation is necessary, but practice is the weather the house must learn." We wrote, "Say the hard thing kindly, leave when the room asks for quiet, put the phone down when the eyes in front of you are telling a story. Forgive as if you're also learning how." He drew a box around one sentence and pushed the pen into my hand, so I'd write it myself. Make promises that survive the day after celebration. I felt my shoulders drop again, the way they do when truth fits. Suga asked me to send him a voice note of nothing, just the room I was in, the soundscape that tells the truth you can't caption. I recorded the hum of the fridge, the elevator cable, the neighbor's laugh bleeding through the wall, the soft rush of sink water, and my own breath folding itself into quiet. He replied with a track where those sounds became percussion, the heartbeat of an ordinary life. "Build from this," he wrote. "It's the only beat that will always be there." Sometimes the wisdom I need comes disguised as a file attachment. J-Hope arrived unannounced with 2 umbrellas and an appetite. We burned pancakes and called it modern art, then leaned on the counter chewing strawberries over the sink like teenagers who think the future is just a bigger weekend. He grinned and said, "You know what you're really doing? You're learning to carry joy in both hands so you don't drop it when something else asks to be held." We practice laughing on purpose, not because everything is easy, but because laughter keeps the doors from sticking when the weather changes. Jin video called at an inconvenient hour, as if inconvenience were the spice missing from modern life. He made me count how many hours I'd slept, then declared, "You're not allowed to be profound on an empty stomach." When I rolled my eyes, he said, "Exactly, roll them toward the kitchen." I ate. The room became less dramatic after that. It's amazing how often wisdom looks like a spoon and a bowl and a friend who refuses to let you mystify what needs maintenance. Taeyong sent a photo he took a few days earlier of a lighthouse. No caption, just a picture. I stared at it longer than I meant to. I thought about how I've chased fireworks my whole career. Beautiful, noisy, brief, unforgettable, and how a lighthouse is the opposite. Quiet, consistent, repetitive in the best way, saving lives by being exactly itself over and over. I wrote back, "This is what I want my love to be. And he replied with one word, yes. Sometimes agreement is a sacred ceremony. By evening, I felt brave enough to open the box of letters I keep in a drawer for when I forget what has carried me this far. There was one from a teacher who believed in me before I did, another from a fan who said, our music cradled her grief long enough for her to sleep. I cried the way you cry when your body's been waiting for permission. Then I laughed at how quickly tears and joy take turns like siblings pushing each other on a swing. I called my mom once more and told her I felt less afraid. She asked what changed. I said, I think I stopped trying to guarantee outcomes and started trying to become someone the outcomes can trust. She hummed that proud little sound mothers make when their children borrow wisdom and return it with interest. Keep walking, she said. Even a lantern needs a traveler. When we hung up, I sat very still and realized stillness can be a kind of gratitude you can't put into words without shrinking it. There was one more thing I needed to say out loud, even if only to the ceiling. I don't owe anyone a spectacle of my becoming. I owe the people I love a faithful presence inside it. That sentence loosened something that had been tight behind my ribs. It made room for the possibility that privacy is not hiding. It's honoring what grows best in shade before it can survive the Sunday. Before sleep, I wrote my 3 lines. Today, I am grateful for the ring I didn't touch, the photo that told the truth, and the voices that turned my apartment into a gentle choir. Today, I could have been softer when I rushed my own heart. Tomorrow, I will practice the lighthouse instead of the fireworks. I taped the paper to the inside of a cabinet where only I will see it. When I closed the door, it felt like I was planting a flag nobody else needs to salute. And then I lay there listening to the building breathe, whispering to the future, the only prayer that feels honest right now. Make me ready in the ways that last. If readiness is character, let me become a home for it. If love is a craft, let me practice until my hands remember without trying. If vows are bridges, let me check the quiet bolts. And if a day is coming that will change the shape of all my days, let me recognize myself there, not by the noise I can make, but by the peace I can keep. I woke before alarms and laced my shoes by the light of the fridge, that small domestic moon that hums its steady hymn. The city was still half asleep, so I let my footsteps be the only percussion, breath syncing with the rhythm of crosswalks and blinking signals. I wasn't running from anything. I was running toward a steadier version of myself, the one who keeps promises on ordinary sidewalks. The air tasted like metal and mint and a little bit of rain. I kept thinking about time not as a countdown but as a craftsman, sanding edges I didn't know were sharp. Somewhere between the third corner and the hill I always underestimate. I realized the thing I fear most isn't change. It's being unchanged by what matters. That was the first prayer of the morning, and I didn't even have to close my eyes to say it. When I got back, I filled the sink and watched steam turn the room into a tiny weather system. Dishes aren't profound, but the way a bowl returns to brightness after soap and patience feels like a parable I can understand. I wrote my 3 lines on a sticky note because the journal was across the room and I didn't want to break the spell of simple things. Gratitude. Cabs that carried me and a city that made space. Softer hands. Speak to yourself like you're someone you love, not someone you're trying to fix. Try differently. Choose kindness before clarity when you can. Clarity arrives faster when it feels safe. Jimin texted a single word, window, which is his way of asking, are you looking out and in? We ended up on a call without video, both of us in separate rooms watching light climb the walls. I told him I'm learning to trust quiet routines, how they weave a net beneath days that try too hard to be dramatic. He said, keep the net, you'll need it when joy jumps. He asked what truth I was avoiding. I said, that sometimes I train excellence to cover for tenderness I haven't practiced enough. He was silent the exact length of a hug and then said, then practice tenderness like scales, daily, off camera. The truth he knows about me keeps arriving like that gentle, specific, impossible to argue with. Later, I met RM at a cafe that smells like pencil shavings and fresh bread. He brought the big notebook, the one that could be mistaken for a door if you lean it against the wall. He drew 2 columns and labeled them with a blunt pencil: furniture and foundation. Under furniture, he wrote, spectacular plans, perfect photos, public applause. Under foundation, he wrote, repair skills, unhurried listening, boundaries that protect tenderness, the ability to disagree without making the other person lonely. We made coffee ring stains like constellations and drew lines between the lists. At the bottom, he wrote, decide what you will not trade even for a good reason, and pushed the pencil my way. I wrote, privacy that keeps love warm, laughter that doesn't need witnesses, rest that doesn't require permission slips, faith that begins with gratitude. He underlined the last one twice and said, that's your first step on days you forget the rest. Suga waved me into a small studio later, more cables than chairs, air thick with the kind of patience only producers understand. He played a loop made from the sounds I sent him earlier. The elevator cable became a low pulse, the neighbor's laugh a hi-hat, my sink a soft snare, my breath a pad that held the whole thing like a steady pair of hands. This is the beat your vows need, he said, half joking and half prophet, which is his favorite ratio. You can perform over fireworks, but you can live over this. We recorded a melody that didn't try too hard to be impressive. It just tried to be true. When we stopped, the silence felt earned. J-Hope appeared with 2 to-go cups and a grin that could persuade winter to consider spring. He told me he'd designed a new drill for joy. 3 songs, no skipping, dance like you're trying to convince your future to join the party. We did it right there, between chords and coffee cups. The kind of dancing that wouldn't trend but would keep a marriage elastic. He said, rehearse happiness so you recognize it when a hard week tries to impersonate your whole life. The room looked better after that, even though nothing had moved. Taeyoung sent a message that only said, museum? We met in a room where the security guards are kinder than they look, and the paintings don't mind if you stare too long. He stood me in front of a landscape I didn't think I'd like, and said, find where the painter rested. It took a while, but then I saw it, the brushwork where the hand unclenched, a sky that softened, a horizon that breathed. That, he said, is where the work stopped being work. You need spots like that in your days. We sat on a bench without talking and let stillness make introductions we keep skipping when life is loud. Later, he handed me a small print from the gift shop, the same painting scaled to my apartment. Put it near your kettle, he said, so you remember to unclench before you pour. Jin refused to let the afternoon pass without a grocery run. For science, he declared, which is his way of saying for sanity. He made me pick produce like I was making vows to vegetables. Choose what you will actually cook, not what looks impressive in the cart. In the checkout line, he pushed my shoulder with the shopping basket and said, eat before you have big thoughts. It makes them kinder. Back home, we cooked badly and ate happily, and the kitchen smelled like competence wasn't invited, but contentment came anyway. He left with Tupperware and a warning. Get enough sleep or your metaphors get dramatic. On my way to throw out the trash, a neighbor couple held the door open for me. They have the sort of married faces that resemble each other the longer they stand together, a blending kindness you can't fake. We ended up talking about weather and rent, and then somehow about the years. The man said, we picked one thing to carry through every season. We ask each other at dinner, what surprised you today? It keeps us students. The woman added, we also apologize fast, even when we're almost right. They laughed and told me they were rooting for my future, like it was a team they've been cheering for since the early draft. I took the trash out feeling like I'd been handed a little playbook with pages worn by good use. I opened messages before sleep and found Army in my inbox again with kindness that travels better than luggage. Someone said, I practiced the lighthouse at work today, steady, quiet, repeating what's true until the fog respected it. Someone else said, I'm not ready for everything, but I'm ready, to be honest. I wrote back where I could, and where I couldn't, I whispered thank you to the ceiling and hoped it would carry. My mom called just to tell me she'd burned the toast and somehow it tasted right anyway. We laughed until the edges of the day loosened. She asked if the lantern was still helpful. I say yes, and that the horizon looked kinder when I walked, not sprinted. She said, good, walk with company. Even a steady lantern looks braver in a group. I thought of the guys of you, of the unexpected teachers, the jeweler polishing patience, the museum bench practicing stillness, the neighbor's question that refuses to let a day end without wonder. There was a letter I'd been writing in pieces to the person I hoped to promise my life to. I added a page tonight and didn't try to make it elegant. I wrote about burnt pancakes and museum skies, about beats made from house sounds, about a grocery list designed to protect tenderness. I wrote, I won't gift you a spectacle when what we need is shelter. I will bring you a steady practice, soup before decisions, sleep before declarations, listening before replies, laughter before conclusions, prayer before plans. I will not treat you like a cliff to leap or a trophy to win. I will treat you like a garden I show up to in all weather. I signed it with my real name and folded it like a small promise that already knows where it belongs. Before I turned off the light, I stood by the fridge and looked at the photo. Taeyoung took the version of me that wasn't performing, the one I want to be in kitchens and hallways and long car rides to nowhere in particular. I whispered to that version, keep going. Become someone your future can lean on without checking the weight. The apartment answered with its familiar breathing. Pipes settling, elevator sighing, the neighbor's kettle cheering like a crowd in miniature. I realized I don't need fireworks to know I'm alive. I need a quiet room filled with things I'm learning to carry well. If you're somewhere between who you've been and who you're becoming, I'm there too. And maybe the distance isn't a canyon. Maybe it's a bridge you're already building with small boards, an apology you don't postpone, a text you send to say, I'm listening, a walk you take without the world in your hand, a page you write and hide in a drawer, because not everything true needs an audience to be real. I'm trying to build that bridge plank by plank with people I trust, the brothers who keep me honest, the family who prays like a habit, the friends who replace my panic with practice, the community that holds up a steady mirror without weaponizing it. I set the kettle for tomorrow and laid out a mug like a welcome mat for morning. I wrote one more line and stuck it to the cabinet where only I'd see it, make promises that survive the day after celebration. Then I went to bed, not certain of outcomes, but steadier in character, which is a better pillow than certainty has ever been. Somewhere in the quiet between breaths, I felt the horizon nod. Not a deadline, not a drum roll, just a lantern agreeing with the pace of my steps, and the future answering back with a soft, inevitable yes. I spent the morning rearranging the bookshelf like it was a map of who I've been, tour programs beside poetry, notebooks with coffee rings beside a worn-out manual on cameras I never fully mastered. I found a folded paper with a set list from a night that changed my life, and I held it the way you hold a bird you're trying not to scare. I kept thinking about how a life is less about collecting trophies and more about curating anchors, objects that remind you of the person you promised to become when no one was watching. The kettle began to sing and I let it. There are songs in a house that never chart, but they hold you up better than most. I called my mom and told her I wanted to visit. We didn't make a plan right then. We just swapped weather and recipes and laughter. She asked me to bring nothing but time. I said, that's the one thing I'm learning to pack first. After we hung up, I wrote on a small card, bring flowers that look like ordinary days. Not roses, not headlines. Something you'd pass without posting and miss only when it's gone. I know now that love grows best where the calendar keeps secrets and the kitchen knows your name. On the way out, I passed a mirror and caught a glimpse of the person I've been rehearsing. Shoulders lower, eyes still, hands not clinging. I whispered a short sentence because long prayers sometimes hide the truth. helped me carry softness like a skill. The elevator sighed like it had been carrying everybody's plans all week. In the lobby, an older man I'd seen a few times at the mailboxes nodded at me as if we were in on the same quiet joke, that all the noisy victories in the world don't matter if you can't be kind on a Tuesday. I took a train because trains respect thinking. You can't make them hurry. You can only match their patience. I watched stations pass like chapters and tried to read the day instead of chasing it. On the seat across the aisle, a child taught her father a game I didn't understand, but I understood the sound of both their laughter. I wrote a line in my notes. I want a future that sounds like that on the hard days. The rhythm of tracks under the carriage became a metronome for honesty, every clack a reminder to stay at the pace of truth, not the speed of fear. My mom met me at the door with the kind of hug that convinces time to sit down for a minute. The house smelled like something simple and perfect enough to make the world less dramatic. We didn't talk about big things at first. We gave small things the microphone, where the plant finally decided to grow, how the neighbor's cat thinks the fence is a stage, which cup makes the tea taste kinder. Then, while cutting fruit, she slid the conversation toward the lantern she'd hung on my path days ago. She didn't ask for answers. She asked about my habits. Are you resting like you plan to love for a long time? It felt like someone checking the bolts on a bridge you're gonna cross at night. We stood there peeling oranges, and the white pith under the skin felt like a metaphor. I didn't want to spoil by explaining. We ate in silence for a while, and I realized stillness can be a kind of wise applause. We pulled old photo albums from a box that had survived too many moves. There I was with crooked hair and a grin that didn't know yet what stages would ask of it. My mom traced a picture with her finger the way you trace a prayer. You were always running towards something, she said. I'm glad to see you learning how to stand. It wasn't praise, it was recognition. Sometimes the most loving thing a parent can do is not feed your speed, but bless your pause. Jimin texted a simple, you good? Which is translation for, tell me the part you'll avoid if I don't ask. I stepped onto the back steps where the air smelled like rain rehearsing its lines and called him. I told him how seeing my childhood in paper and ink had turned my chest into a museum, every exhibit labeled with the sentence I'm still trying to finish. He listened, then said, keep one exhibit open, the room where you practice tenderness. He told me he'd been keeping his own little ritual, a few minutes a day, where he asked, what would kindness do here? And then he tries to do it without fanfare. The truth he knows about me arrived like always, soft and precise. When I'm scared, I get efficient. When I'm hopeful, I get gentle. He asked which one I'm feeding. I wanted to say both, but the question answered itself in the quiet between us. Later, my dad came in from the yard with the kind of dirt on his hands. That means the world is still generous to those who show up. He didn't ask about plans or dates. He asked if I'd eaten and whether I was singing for myself lately. There's a difference between singing to impress and singing to heal. We sat at the table that remembers our whole family history. And he told a story about a time he almost quit something he loved because success tried to make him forget why he started. Don't let big rooms erase small reasons, he said. Take the small reason with you. Put it in your pocket. Pull it out when the lights are too bright to see. I put the sentence in my phone like a talisman. On the train back, I listened to the voice memo. Suga sent a demo stitched from ordinary sounds. The heartbeat of a kitchen turned into a lullaby for anxious thoughts. He added a bass line that felt like it had been there the whole time, under my feet, waiting to be heard. He typed only 3 words. This will last. I closed my eyes and let the loop teach my breath. There's bravado in making something huge. There's courage in making something durable. When I got home, RM's notebook was still on my table. A kind of altar to decisions that don't make content but make character. I added a new line under foundation. Learn to repair faster than you retreat. I wrote it because of a small argument. I almost started with someone I loved. I could feel the moment when I wanted to win more than I wanted to understand. I didn't take the bait. I chose the bridge, not the cliff. I texted, can we try that again? Slower. The relief that came back through the screen was a lesson. Repair isn't an admission of failure. It's the art of keeping the garden alive when the wind visits. J-Hope arrived with a bag of groceries and a playlist that insisted the evening considered joy. We cooked with the choreography of siblings, bumped hips, burned another pancake, and called it tradition. At one point, he turned down the music and said, "Tell me the promise you're making to yourself that no one else can enforce." I thought for a moment and answered, "I will not abandon the ordinary." He nodded like a coach hearing a game plan he can believe in. We ate at the counter because some meals don't need a ceremony. They need company. Taeyong sent me a single line of text. "Lighthouse check?" So I walked to the window and looked at the building across the way where a little desk lamp glows every night at the same hour. I've never met the person who sits there, but they've become proof that consistency is a kind of quiet hospitality. I pictured the life I'm cultivating as a light that says to someone I love, "You can find your way by me. I won't be perfect, but I'll be here." He replied with a photo of a streetlight in fog, then added, "See, even when it can't reach far, it still shows up." Jin video called to audit my sleep schedule and then told me a joke so well timed it should be classified as medicine. He said, "You can't be wise on empty batteries. Plug into soup." I showed him the pot on the stove. He clapped like I'd won something. I keep learning that joy isn't childish. It's fuel. He's a mechanic for moods, tightening bolts with humor until the whole machine runs better. Before bed, I opened a message from an army who said she'd been married for 34 years. She wrote, "Our secret is that we say thank you more than we say I'm sorry. It's not that we don't make mistakes, it's that gratitude builds a floor for the apologies to stand on." I stared at the sentence long enough for it to move in. I wrote back, "Thank you for the floor," and meant it twice. I sat at the kitchen table and added a page to the letter I've been writing. The one without an address yet, because the address is a day I'm walking toward. I wrote about oranges peeled beside a parent's steady hands, about photographs that don't flatter but tell the truth, about a train car full of strangers who unknowingly calibrated my heart. I wrote, "I'm practicing being the same person in every room, on stage, in a hallway, on the phone, in the mirror. If I can do that, then when I say yes to you, it won't sound like new language. It will sound like the sentence I've been becoming for years." I signed the page and tucked it under the others like you tuck a child in, trusting that sleep will do the work you can't supervise. I cleaned the counter one more time because simple order helps me hear the right questions. Then I taped a small note inside the cabinet, a place only I'll see when I reach for a mug in the morning. Carry tenderness or don't carry anything at all. I stood there a long time after the lights were off, letting the apartment teach its quiet lessons, the tick of the clock, the pipe's old hymn, the elevator's gentle ache. This is the sound of a life that doesn't need to shout to be true. Before sleep, I tried to name what exactly felt different now that the lantern on my path has a direction to shine. It isn't certainty. I still don't know the weather for every season ahead. It isn't proof. Love doesn't hand out warranties. It's something like alignment. The inside of me is starting to match the outside of me in ways that survive mourning. If there's a measure for readiness, perhaps it's this. I can sit in a room with myself without negotiating a better version. I can call my mother and hear a blessing instead of a deadline. I can tell a friend the truth before it turns into a performance. I can pray in sentences small enough to fit in my pocket.